Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Med Dialogue. This morning, we're going to discuss how to rethink the energy sectors after the shock of the Covid-19. As you know, this session about energy has been one of the focus of Med, even from the very beginning of these meetings physically in Rome. And the reason is that energy is seen as a powerful tool of cooperation, of creating shared prosperity, of creating stability in the Mediterranean. Many things and projects were underway when the outbreak came into at the beginning of the year. So what's happening now? What are the trends that are accelerating and the ones that are slowing down between prices, state budget, investments, and also the transition to a more green and sustainable energy? We'll discuss this with the oil minister of Iraq, Izan Abdul Jabbar Ismail, and the minister of petroleum and mineral resources of Egypt, Tarek El Molla. But we already have connected Joseph McMonigal, who is Secretary General of the International Energy Forum. Good morning, Joseph.
Andrea, nice to be with you and everybody at Med 2020.
Oh, very good to have you today. The International Energy Forum is the world's largest international organization of energy ministers from 70 countries, and it's a very relevant platform for international dialogue on energy. So it's very good to have you here today, and would just like to start with you because, many things happen in the energy sectors after COVID. We saw, if we take prices as the indices, as we as financial journalists, we do on a day in, day out basis, we saw that we started the year around 60 and then the price crashed in April close to zero or even negative. That was technical, but then there was a rebound. And after, at the beginning of November, the news of a vaccine were launched by some big pharma. The situation changed. There was a rebound. The Brent and crude are up 25% more or less November to today in the last 30 days. And the energy sector S&P indices is up 35%. How do you see the current market conditions? Because today it's a kind of a special day. There's an OPEC Plus meeting underway. They discussed over the weekend, and they will probably announce in a few hours their decision. How do you see the current market condition? What was the reaction of the market? Yes, to COVID on one hand, but also to the idea that sooner or later the world will get back to, people driving, people flying, and ships traveling a lot with goods.
Well, thanks for the introduction. And before I answer the question, let me just first start by commenting on some recent events and I think what are rising tensions in the region that have implications for both energy security and economic recovery. Last week, we saw 3 attacks on energy facilities and infrastructure. One was on a fuel tank facility in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, another on an oil tanker that was out in the Red Sea at another Saudi terminal, and also an attack on a Shell Egypt oil facility in Nigeria. And then, of course, this weekend, there was the assassination of one of Iran's top nuclear officials. I'm really concerned that we're in a critical period here, especially with the transition to a new administration in the US and those that unwisely might seek to take advantage of the situation. So I would say, to start off, in answer to your question, I think there's tremendous geopolitical risk at the moment. And I would urge restraint and caution on all sides. From an energy perspective, these events also serve as a reminder to both governments in producing and consuming countries, as well as the global energy sector generally, of their responsibility to maintain energy security and market stability in ever more complex and interconnected world markets. And more importantly, I think global economic recovery depends on these critical energy infrastructure facilities, including these production, upstream facilities, refining, transport, and ports, as well as free and safe passage in sea lanes, one of the topics of the East Med today. So back to your question about COVID in particular, because I think the events that I just talked about really add to the risk that's been created by the COVID pandemic. which as you noted, has brought energy demand to historic lows. We find ourselves now in a second wave of the virus in Europe and the US and in many other parts of the world, and oil demand continues to struggle. The latest outlooks from IEA and OPEC, their oil market forecasts this past month show that demand will decline by 8.8 million barrels a day, according to the IEA, and 9.8 million barrels a day, according to OPEC. That's the largest decline that EIA has given since April, and for OPEC, it's the largest decline of the year. So while the COVID pandemic has resulted in these largest recorded oil demand shocks, we're also seeing similar effects in natural gas markets. And initial assessments suggest that natural gas will decline by about 4% in 2020. So in addition to the fallout and the consequences of the pandemic for the energy market, uncertainty makes it especially difficult to navigate. And although, as you noted, recent vaccine developments signal a light at the end of the tunnel, there's no silver bullet to bringing energy markets back to pre-COVID levels, and really uncertainty prevails. The demand shock has exacerbated what was already an investment crisis that predated COVID, which risks a supply shock in the future. On the other hand, we're seeing greater policy momentum, especially in Europe, towards emissions reductions and greater calls for smart energy transitions as part of a green recovery in major economies. But at the same time, I think we all recognize that hydrocarbons will remain a part of the picture, comprising between 23 to 25% of the world's energy mix into 2040 and 2045. And this requires balancing two priorities, reducing emissions and increasing affordable access, and meeting growing energy demand while achieving these shared climate and development goals. So enhancing connectivity through clean fossil fuel technologies and energy market integration can help reignite global economic growth, facilitate energy transitions, and share prosperity with future generations. International and domestic energy strategies based around maintaining this fine balance can provide a starting point for countries to try to navigate energy strategy during this uncertainty caused by COVID.
Yeah, for sure. And I will get back to that because I've got many questions for you, also about, all of you describe takes investments. And we know that investments are one of the first victim of this situation. International oil companies are slashing capex looking into 2021. And so also the energy transition, which was one of the most interesting engine in the energy sector, is someone says it's at risk of slowing down. But I'll get back to you because now I want to hear from Ihsan Abdul Jabbar Ismail, his Ministry of Oil in Iraq, and is also the Director General of the national company Basra Oil Company. As you can imagine, today there's this big Opal Plus meeting underway, and the minister has been asked to join the meeting. So what he could do is to tape a video that he just shared with us. So just listen together to the Minister of Oil in Iraq.
Good day. Thank you to invite me to attend this very important conference, and I'm sorry to not attend this conference directly due to some another meeting program. I'm Ihsan Abdul Jabbar, the Minister of Oil in Iraq, Prime Minister Deputy for Energy Sector. Iraq is one of the biggest important oil export in the country, in the worldwide. As a country, we were part of OPEC establishment in 1960, and now we are the second exporter, as you know, for the oil. Really, it was very challenging time during the last 5-6 months due to COVID-19 lockdown and what the bad story of oil price fall down. Alhamdulillah, there is some hopes that the energy market will be recovered within the next 3 to 6 months. Iraq within this time was challenging also its commitment to OPEC. OPEC cut. There is more than 1.2 million barrels of oil, of available oil. You cannot produce it due to the OPEC commitment. In the end, OPEC commitment is come to be fair for all, fair for the exporter, for the importer, for the consumption market. Iraq is, till now, even with the challenge, Iraq insist that Iraq will stay committed for OPEC requirement and OPEC outlook. Yes, within this more than 6 months, Iraq challenging crisis. I can't say economic crisis, and this economic crisis impact was for all the Iraq, even with the IOCs. There is some delay in commitment, but we still have the power to balancing this commitment with the IOCs and to pay back all the investment within 3 months. Iraq tried to be one of the balancing exporter to keep the energy market stability, and we do our best with our partner Saudi Arabia and Russia and the other exporter to keep the energy market balancing and to avoid any more fluctuated. Iraq also have its methodology and strategy about changing to new and renewable energy. There is real discussion with all the IOCs, how we can make decarbonization, how we can utilize all the produced gas to avoid more CO2 and CO, and how we can make some transaction to the solar energy and renewable energy. And alhamdulillah, we have good steps in that way. We are in direct negotiation with many investor and contractor to start many projects. Some of them is under awarding now. Yes, it is a small, not more than 300 megawatt, but it is good starting in the energy market. Our target is within 2040. Within 2040, we have to reach 20% of our energy production to be, inshallah, from solar and renewable energy. We speak about 50 gigawatt energy requirement, 50 gigawatt of electricity requirement in 2030. Iraq is 40 million in population, and we have 2.5 growth per year. Growth, and that means in 2040 we will reach more than 50 million in population. Iraq is big market, and the investment in the solar energy and renewable energy is one of our target. We try to enhance the investment law in principle and in details to make more to develop the investment environment and to make it more healthy. Thank you again to give me this room to speak about Iraq now and the future. I think as normal, Iraq will stay one of the biggest energy area worldwide. Thank you.
Well, thanks again to the Minister of Oil of Iraq, Hizan Abdul Jabbar Ismail. So, Joseph McMonigal, we heard again how important is the oil industry for Iraq, which is the second largest oil producer, and even including the cuts in production decided by OPEC, they are kind of a 3.8 million per day. But according to market sources, the output, the potential output of Iraq oil fields is around 9 to 10 million barrels per day. So clearly, the resilience of the economy and the dependence of the economic growth to oil resources is really high, as it is in all the main producer countries. So how do you expect this to affect also? You started with instability in the region, the situation looking ahead, and how is this changing the geopolitical aspects that are so relevant also given what happened lately, and what's going to happen with the transition to the Joe Biden administration in the U.S.?
Yeah, well, interesting remarks by the minister. I think he's an important component to this OPEC group that has a very important decision today in terms of balancing markets. So I'm not at all surprised he's had to divert his attention. But in answer to your question, I think the demand shock from COVID has had multiple effects on oil and gas markets. You know, from reduced prices, certainly, but also that means reduced revenue in government treasuries, significant weaker demand, and of course, the inflated stockpiles of the crude and petroleum products. Net zero strategies during the pandemic continue, I think, to gain momentum. We saw some really exciting announcements from some Asian countries on new targets in the fall, and we can continue to see greater traction in major economies as part of a green recovery that aims to build back better, as President-elect Biden would say. However, even amid these efforts to overcome the COVID impacts, challenges remain in meeting climate, clean air, and sustainable development goals. Doing so will continue to be linked to the use of clean technologies such as carbon capture, use and storage, the role of blue hydrogen in circular models, as was recently endorsed by the G20. And these technologies can accelerate fuel switching and create synergies to integrate renewables and green gas and hydrogen and other carbon dioxide solutions. But meanwhile, like I touched on, and I think in terms of Iraq getting to that higher number that you talked about, more investment than 2020 levels is needed to change the course of really what looks to be a future of higher prices and increased market volatility. And this is at a time when governments and consumers are already feeling the economic impacts of reduced revenues. Without increased investment, supply-demand balances can tighten faster, leading to price levels trending higher and of course, more volatility, which nobody likes. This raises the risk of more frequent, short-lived price spikes, or even a longer-lasting upward price pressure that will deepen the impacts of COVID and in turn slow-track economic recovery and sustainable growth prospects. So higher price levels and more volatile markets will come at a time when consumers and businesses and governments at all levels are dealing with negative economic effects from the pandemic. It reduces the number of people available to afford cooking and heating and transportation fuels. And of course, the volatility, it adds to the uncertainty for governments and companies. It also reduces, I think, the ability of oil and gas companies to afford investments in new, cleaner technologies to respond to rising regulatory and policy demands. So achieving these climate goals through long-term net zero policies and other strategies will be aided, I think, by facilitating oil and gas investment to enhance the short and medium-term market stability and really the deployment of these clean technologies at scale.
Yeah, this is, I think, one of the most crucial points currently, because, there's a big political will to accelerate in this direction. If you take Europe, for example, we know that the recovery fund will be devoted for kind of a 40% to the green energy transition. And we know that Joe Biden's first decision is to revamp the Paris Agreement, the Paris deal on climate change. On the other hand, you have big international oil companies in trouble when it takes to invest. And one of the market estimates says that between 25 and 40% of all the investments looking at 2019 will not be there due to this crisis. So you were mentioning how to help oil companies to maintain the pace of investment, to look beyond COVID-19 crisis, and to be the real player of the green transition. Many large companies, including Italian Eni, for example, in an interview over the weekend, Claudio Descalzi, the CEO, confirmed the effort of the company to become a renewable company, kind of a green company. But at the same time, the transition is difficult. What can be done to, go through and to muddle through this situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was about to compliment Eni and its CEO, Mr. Descalzi. I mean, I think the company has really been ahead of the pack of all the big oil majors in terms of announcing pledges. I mean, I think they were out of the box, early, I think maybe February of this year, with this target to reduce absolute emissions by 80% by 2050. And this target is well above the 70% target that was cited by the IEA Sustainable Development Scenario Model. So I think Eni is proving to be a model, and you're certainly seeing other companies move in that direction. And I think, look, the energy transition is inevitable, and I think we just have to proceed with caution, though. I mean, I think we don't want a disruptive transition that has negative consequences for economic recovery, especially now in the wake of COVID. You mentioned President-elect Biden's plans to rejoin the Paris climate agreement and also his green energy plans. I think it will certainly add to the momentum, the global momentum that I think has really been very resilient during the COVID pandemic. I mentioned earlier these announcements coming from Asia. You had President Xi of China make a really big, bold announcement about net zero plan that his country is pursuing. We saw similar announcements from South Korea and also from Japan. And so I think there's a lot of momentum, and the U.S. getting back into the Paris Climate Agreement, I think will add to that. But the Biden, I think, plan that this $2 trillion investment in green infrastructure, I think is very clever, actually. And I think number one, it's from a practical standpoint, it's very needed. I mean, all of the investments in green and clean energy are great, but we need an infrastructure to be able to deliver it, to the markets that we need it. And certainly hydrogen itself has huge infrastructure requirements. But I also think from a political standpoint, especially in the U.S., as President-elect Biden is looking at either a Senate that will be in Republican hands or a tie. And so it's going to be difficult to advance, the agenda without bipartisan cooperation. And I do think that, investing in infrastructure is a way to get there. And I'm hopeful that there will be bipartisan cooperation there. And I think this investment in green and clean energy infrastructure is something the rest of the world, I think, needs to look at as well.
Now, as you know, we are at the Mediterranean dialogues, and we want to go closer to what's happening and how energy is playing its role in cooperation and also in development and economic recovery of the region. This is why we welcome the Minister of Petroleum and Mineral Resources of Egypt, Tarek El Molla. Unfortunately, I have to tell you that he was asked to join a meeting with Prime Minister Al-Sisi, and so we just taped an hour ago a conversation with the minister that I want to introduce now. Good morning, Minister. It's a pleasure having you, and thanks for your time.
Morning, Andreas. Thank you. Morning, Andreas. Thank you.
Well, first of all, we'll discuss energy and the reaction of Egypt and all the region to the disruption that happened with COVID-19. But first of all, let me ask you just in a few words, how's the country coping with the pandemic and what's the situation currently?
Well, we had, of course, at the beginning, made some partial lockdowns when this pandemic started up, and this was early in April, May, and then afterwards we started the gradual reopening and easing up in order to make sure that we have had all the precautionary measures in order to make sure that the disruption of the business continuity as well as economic negative impacts. So therefore, we've taken these measures. Meanwhile, preparing all the health care, whether hospitals or intensive cares, with the needed emergency steps on a national wise. At the same time, we've been able to arrange for the task force for the employees to work with shifts, like 50% of the workforce to move and to rotate. Meanwhile, for women who are taking care of kids below 12 years old would stay at home because schools and nurseries were off during this, especially summertime. So we've made sure that we don't have many people engaged in the daily activities, but at the same time, there is no disruption of the business activities, whether in the operations, whether in the construction, whether in business and the banking system everywhere. So Egypt has been able to absorb and to accommodate this challenge, and meanwhile trying to avoid any negative impact on the health of the majority of the people.
Now, we wish you all the best in fighting the pandemic, but it was an unprecedented shock also for the economy, the global economy, and also the economy of the MENA region. Now, for the energy sector, all the restriction and the lockdowns and the fall in demand of energy consumption created tensions in the market. The first question I have for you, you recently said it's a change of paradigm. What do you see in the future of the energy sector after COVID? What the trends that were already there that are accelerated, and what has been slowed down, and how do you cope with also the tension on the prices sectors that created clearly a great problem for producing countries?
Well, this is a good question. Of course, we all said that the world before Corona is not the same world after the COVID-19. So therefore, countries that were able to adopt themselves in order to make sure that they can overcome the challenge and to go with the new conditions will be able to survive a longer period. And I think that having said that, the reason that I'm quite confident for Egypt is that we've been taking very bold economic reforms over the last 5-6 years, and these have helped us really to be able to have the minimal negative impacts on Egypt from the COVID-19 impact global wide. So therefore, our reforms, which included a really important macroeconomics steps that we have taken, like the flotation of the Egyptian pounds, the reforms of the energy sector subsidies and restructuring. A lot of important measures that we have taken over the last few years enabled us really, and will be able for us to go forward with even encouraging more investments, therefore, and to be able to unlock all our potential. Therefore, we've been, perhaps it has been even announced by the IMF that Egypt was among the few countries globally, and perhaps the only country in Africa to have a positive economic growth during this fiscal year. So I think that we are taking these steps forward, and we will be able to accommodate all the challenges. Of course, the decrease in oil prices has it's a double sword tool, because from one side, perhaps for countries importing or net importers like Egypt, they would say that this is good for us, but at the same time, we are also producing countries. So therefore, a balanced price would be good for our partners who are involved in the exploration and production. And of course, we would like to see the prices reaching a balance so that to make a reasonable economic value for both producers and consumers. But at the same time, we did not stop, and we were able to attract our business, international business, oil and gas companies like ExxonMobil and Chevron, whom we have been able to sign exploration concessions over the last few months in spite of the COVID-19. And we are also continuing into our steady growth in our operations, opening new refinery complexes, and was inaugurated even by the president 2 months ago here in Cairo, and one of the biggest in Africa that was worth $4.3 billion. And this is part of our strategy to reach self-sufficiency by year 23. So I think that all together, this is among the bold bundle reform package that the government had embarked a few years back under the leadership of President Sisi.
Now, Minister, you were mentioning some of the new developments, and basically due to the major discoveries in the recent year, now Egypt is playing a major role, especially in the natural gas sector. But big oil international companies are slashing their capex investment due to the economic crisis and due to the lack in demand. Do you think that this could slow down also the projects underway? We know you do have some 4 major developments, including Zor, but also the West Nile development and 2 others that are supposed to increase in a remarkable way the production, the output in the near future. How about, the current situation and what the big oil companies are supposed to do and the lack of investments we've been discussing?
Well, in part, this question is right for the global changes of the strategies of the major oil and gas companies. But in transition, what they are doing currently is that they are shifting with their strategies. Sorry. For renewables and green energy. Having said that, so the focus now for the transition energy, which is gas, and
No. we can interrupt if you need to drink some water, Minister.
Yes, please.
But now you're on mute. Okay, not a problem. Okay. We'll be back in a second. Here we go.
Yes, sorry for that. Well, they have taken this measure of transition fuel, and which is the natural gas. So therefore, if you have seen us lately now focusing with our major partners in what we have incepted together on having the East Mediterranean, not only forum, but East Mediterranean strategy altogether. So therefore, when we see the major players like BP or ENI and Shell, they are all focusing on their offshore activities in Egypt. And lately, we've been able to get together also ExxonMobil and Chevron to join this big pool of major companies. And when they come, they will be working all together in to have their economies of scale together with Cyprus, Israel, and Egypt. So therefore, I think that it is part of the diversity of the major players as well as the oil and gas industry. So therefore, I think for the investments, we will see a change of strategy, but not a major reduction. It is going to be reposition and reprioritize their activities by focusing more on regional business activities on natural gas rather than the traditional oil.
Now, you can take a time to drink if you need that, but let me ask you on this, which is very, very relevant for all the area, because you played a leading role in establishing the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum. And we've been talking and discussing also in the recent years, also with you, the role that energy can have to create more cooperation and to allow more safety, security, and also prosperity to the region. But it's not being a straight line. You know, there are tensions on the way, and I'm asking you, how do you see the role that the forum, the East Mediterranean Gas Forum, can play, will play to reduce tension and to create a different perspective of cooperation? And if you do already have some projects that you can share that will that will create some steps going forward.
You just rightly said in your question and how we can use this cooperation in all countries for the welfare of the people there. So the idea of having this forum is really to have the founding countries and other countries that will join to have mutual benefit and cooperation, so that to have the gas as a catalyst, and that will be a source of wealth for the countries. So having said that, I think that we have already started common project, and we have initiated already with the World Bank a regional study on how to have this what they call a corridor, the gas corridor from the Eastern Mediterranean to Europe. We have already now currently gas coming from Israel to Egypt. We are talking about having a pipeline from Cyprus to Egypt. We are already exporting gas from Egypt to Jordan, from Israel to Jordan. So there is already existing projects and other projects under study currently. And now having this important offshore activities for major important companies will also create new opportunities for further development of these fields.
Let me ask you another question on this, and so you can also take a sec. Now, Minister, do you think that geopolitical conditions in the Mediterranean area are supportive of this effort to use energy as a powerful tool of cooperation and creating also peaceful conditions in the area? Or do you think that looking ahead in 2021, there could be some major obstacles or some areas of confrontation, as we saw in the past, that could also slow down this process? What's your sense of this?
No, I think it will be, the gas will be really a pivotal tool for, for the countries to improve their cooperation together. Tensions will reduce at least between the existing countries or founding countries. I would say that one of the reasons that this will improve in the coming year is the willingness of major countries, super major countries, superpower like the United States and France to join this forum, whether as members or as observers. And this would give weight to the forum and give credibility also and give momentum. Having with us also the EU as an observer, together with the World Bank and many other countries that are now applying for whether observership or membership, will give this momentum to the forum and will definitely enhance and improve the cooperation between the countries. Therefore, we have we have identified through the advisory committee, which is a setup under the ministerial board. This advisory committee, which includes the regional companies or international companies that are involved in the East Mediterranean, and they have started already to identify potential projects of common interest in all these countries, and there is a big future for these projects. This is from one side. From the other side, what we are aiming is to be really an alternative, reliable source of natural gas to Europe. Having said that, we are working together in order to develop the gas in the Eastern Mediterranean to monetize it through exporting it by our LNG terminals until a possible pipeline project could be done. So I think I'm of the opinion that this forum would be the good reason and a good platform for further cooperation and would be a catalyst for peace for these countries. Thank you.
Well, for sure, it's a very important new thing into the area. It's a platform of dialogue, which is relevant. At the same time, it's a platform to build a more sustainable model in terms of energy development. And my question is related to the transition in the energy sector towards a more sustainable and green model. Do you think that what's happening with COVID and the reaction of the industry is slowing down or accelerating this? And what are you doing in this sense?
Well, of course, the COVID-19 had slowed down a lot of things. And the fact that people are not able to travel or to meet of course, except through video conferencing, has also limited the ability to conclude the deals. However, I think with the new vaccine now that is about to be launched, I think by coming year 21, things will get back to normal, and we'll be able to see faster activities and to start to realize all the good things that we spoke about for the welfare of this region. And I think that the companies have lost a lot due to this COVID-19, and they don't have further luxury of time to lose more value in their shares and the economy of the countries as well. So we will all be looking forward for accelerating the process. And I'm very optimistic for the year 21.
All right, just let me ask a very fast couple of questions to conclude, Minister. The first one is about the role that Italy can play in this scenario, because we know that Italy is one of the partners of the East Mediterranean Gas Forum, but it's an historic industrial partner also for the energy sector in Egypt. We read that there are new plans of investment by ENI for a big improvement in a plant. And what can you tell us in terms of these projects and the relation between Italy and Egypt in terms of energy cooperation?
Well, Italy is a valuable and very important partner to Egypt. It is a founder member, of course, of the EMGF. Plus, we have to say that it is the gate to Europe. So this gas, when it is exported from the Eastern Mediterranean, so our gate will be through the networks of Italy, the pipelines network of Italy. This is number one. Secondly, of course, when we talk about our partner ENI, they are the biggest producer of gas in Egypt. They have been here in Egypt for more than 65 years. And they have created a reliable long-term strategic partnership with Egypt, and a credibility that none of our existing partners have had, like ENI. Having said so, they are there and committed to Egypt, whether in the upstream activities or midstream or downstream. And we have many projects together, not only, as I say, in the exploration and production, but also in the downstream when we talk about CNG marketing or fuels or lubricants. And I think we have a lot of many projects together to come. So we value the partnership with Italy, we value the partnership with the ENI, and as we consider them our strategic partners.
Minister, lastly, what's your sense of the market conditions? You know, there's an OPEC meeting on the way. They're discussing if to extend curbs on production into 2021. Their market is pretty volatile. Do you feel like there's an oversupply or an undersupply in the market? And what's your sense of what the best decision could be for all oil producer countries?
Well, because of what happened due to the COVID-19, of course, disruptions and sharp decline in consumption during the crisis was very deep, to the extent that when even countries started to reopen gradually, the producing countries were not able to control also their not all of them, of course, but to control their quota as per the OPEC Plus deal, because they have lost a lot of their budgets during this crisis. Of course, I think that there will be an extension to this to the deal in order to try to improve the prices as they have improved lately, just with having the news of the vaccine. And I think that as the momentum goes up again with the consumption gaining grounds again during 2021, but we wouldn't see a very big increase in prices, in my opinion, during the course of 21. But at least it will be around the 50s dollars per barrel, in my opinion, until the full year 21 gets back to what it was before COVID-19. So the consumption of 2019, let me say, by the end of the year 21. However, of course, the challenge will be for producing countries that new energy also has, due to technology, have also gained and grown during this time. So the challenge will be always there, and competition will be always there. But I think we, as the world, we will always be in need of traditional oil and fossil fuel up till the year 2050 or 2040 at least, as the major or the main energy source.
Minister Tarek El-Molla, thank you so much for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, we had to rush a bit to tape the interview, so I'm sorry, apologize for some technical glitches along the way. But let me get back to Joseph McMoneagle to comment a bit what the Egyptian minister said. And first of all, the role that gas will play in the Mediterranean, East Mediterranean Gas Forum, where they all sit together, but we know that the area remain one of the most controversial for many aspects, from Libya to Cyprus, Egypt and Turkey on different sides, and US and Russia on different sides. And then again, France on one hand, Italy on the other. How do you see the evolution of the situation? Because this morning you reminded us that we are entering a kind of a dangerous phase from this point.
Yeah, as I was listening to the minister speak, it reminded me that sometimes crisis situations impacting energy security also have the potential to create panic and alarm, but they also have the power to bring people together and to achieve cooperation. And I think, at least I'm happy to say that throughout this crisis, that the response of the international community has really been the latter. And certainly want to commend his leadership in organizing and forming the East Med Gas Forum. I think it will encourage cooperation and dialogue in this important region and sector. And I do think energy security and energy supply can be a source of cooperation. And so I think ultimately when countries think about their economies and their citizens, I think ensuring adequacy of energy supply and cooperation on these fronts, I think, is really always the winner. And I expect that a lot of good will come out of this East Med Gas Forum. We're actually helping the forum in its formation stages and providing some technical advice. And I look forward to participating in some of their meetings.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes sense. And we know that peace runs also on pipelines that are connecting different countries and demand and offer, which is a good point. But, it's not a straight line. There are something on the way to manage. And there was another point, which is clean energy transition. Do you think that this will remain a priority even for producing countries that today are so desperate to cash in and to reduce the fall in the budget that were mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that he said that I wrote down some comments on was sort of a price balance, having a balance between prices. And I think, for the average person, for a producer to be saying that, I think seems a little bit awkward. But in reality, they want a situation where the global economy thrives because that's better for their business. And that's why, you hear, countries like Saudi Arabia talk about investment and stable prices because they see higher prices as really headwinds on global economic activity and growth. And at the end of the day, a healthy economy is good for their customers. So I think that was an important point he said. In terms of the transition, look, I think we're still on this race. I look at it as a marathon, but the race for the energy transition is still on. I think we shouldn't apply any brakes, as a result of the pandemic. But I think what I'm saying, and I think what the minister and others are saying, is we need to proceed with caution. There's some slippery pavement ahead. And if we're not careful, it can really disrupt, global economic recovery. And so that's why, I'm talking about investment. I see the minister was talking about investment. And I just think it's really, really critical. And just one last point, on not just on gas, but on oil in particular. The pandemic, of course, has had a tremendous impact on demand, as we've seen. Led to negative pricing in April, and I've talked about the numbers from OPEC and IEA. And I know it seems counterintuitive to be talking about a supply shortage when you have very weak demand, but this is something that at the IEF we're very concerned about. I mean, OPEC supply, yes, they're having this meeting today. They were very responsible in the spring, addressing the collapse of 20 million barrels a day being wiped off the market when the global economy shut down. And I think they've shown that they've been responsible in previous and subsequent meetings, and I think they'll be responsible today. But OPEC supply can come back very easily. It's really the non-OPEC supply, places like the US, Latin America, other parts of the world that, if there isn't continued investment, you're going to have a shortage. And it's really going to, number one, it's not just going to have an impact on prices, it also will have a geopolitical impact because you'll be depending on one part of the world for energy sources that keep the world economy growing and operating. So there's a lot, COVID has really thrown us a big curveball, if you will. And I just think we have to be responsible and very practical coming out of it to see the global economic recovery we all want.
Is a balanced price in the 50s area, as the Tarak Al-Molla told us today?
Well, I don't get into commenting on prices, but I do think OPEC has really what we worry about is market stability, because volatility doesn't help anybody. Maybe energy traders, but stable energy markets is what we want. And I think the action that they took along with the G20 in April really stabilized energy markets. Maybe I think there's kind of a floor on energy markets, but weak demand is also a bit of a ceiling. But I'm just worried that this is not a financial crisis that had long-term impacts on demand. This is a health crisis, and so I do think we see it in spurts. When the cases go down, you see demand come back quite quickly. And I think that's what will happen. I think you will see a lot of pent-up demand, and I'm worried that supply will not be able to keep up with it, and the resulting higher prices will create headwinds for the global economy.
Yeah, sure. And market are anticipating the vaccine effect, but That's very elastic, as we saw when the lockdowns are over. People tend to move as they did before. But we know that there are some sectors that makes a relevant stake of the energy demand. For example, jet fuel, which makes kind of 8 to 10%. And until long-haul flights will be back, it will be difficult. You said at the beginning, there's no silver bullet, but how can we rely, on these perspectives that markets are already anticipating? In a nutshell, because we have to wrap it up, what will be the main trend in 2021? What's your outlook?
Yeah, so I think you touched on a very key point, this jet fuel demand part of the picture. We held a symposium in October with major players from the tourism and energy sectors that are really the nexus of this area, and really certainly the tourism sector really needs these long haul flights to come back in order for there to be a recovery there, and it's such a big contributor to the global economy and economic growth. But on the energy side of things, it's really the missing ingredient from oil prices moving to another level and demand increasing. And we think that with the vaccine, with airlines continuing to be leaders in terms of taking steps to provide clean environments and other social distancing type of and health measures, that we could potentially see an increase in 2021 of about 25% in jet fuel demand. I know that's optimistic. That's more than what airlines are saying or what energy companies are saying. But I mean, I think they're being, just extra cautious as a result of coming out of the pandemic. But we do think that if we have a vaccine, and we do have, the tourism sector in general continuing to practice these great, health measures, that we could see an increase in not back to normal levels, but at least an increase of about 25% over this year.
This will be crucial. So thanks also for pointing out this point. And Joseph McMoneagle, Secretary General at the International Energy Forum, thanks for joining MED this morning. Even with this kind of a strange panel today with two taped interviews, but it was great having you. And thanks to the Energy Minister of Egypt, Tarek El-Molla, and Hisan Abdul Jabbar Ismail, Minister of Oil in Iraq, for participating, even though with a taped interview today. It's a very special day also for the energy sector. And thanks you all for joining us and for listening, and keep going with the 2020 MED edition. Thank you.